welcome to episode 62 of Book Writing Tips, quick tips for new and seasoned authors, and I am your host, Alba Arango. In today's episode, I wanted to go over what I consider 9 very basic tips for writing a book. Now, my podcasts usually focus on like one very specific thing, but today I want to kind of just take a step back and go over some 9 different very basic tips for writing a book. They're probably helpful if you are just now starting to write your book. If you are a seasoned author, then they're probably good reminders. Some of them I know I need frequently when I'm writing a book. So let's get down to it. What are some basic tips for writing a book? Alrighty then. Today's episode will be in 2 parts as always. In the first part, I want to go over some sort of non-writing tips. And I know that sounds weird because I'm supposed to be talking about book writing, but they're all related to book writing. They're just not about the actual writing itself. And then part 2, I will get into some tips for the actual writing itself. Now, I did want to just kind of remind everyone that all of these are just my tips, my suggestions. Every author is different. Every book is different. And what works for me may not work for you. But I do think it is always good to hear perspectives from seasoned authors who have already published books, that have written more than one book, that have learned, they have the voice of experience. It's one of the reasons why I still attend writers' conferences, even though I've already published, 13 books. You can always learn more, and it's always good to refresh your memory on things that maybe you remembered back in the day and you had forgotten. So with no further ado, let's get down to it. Let's talk about part 1 and some non-writing tips. Okay, my first suggestion is this. Have a designated writing space. And I know I have covered this in previous podcast episodes too, but I really think having a dedicated space where you do the bulk of your writing can really help get you into the right mindset to write. So if you are fortunate enough to have an actual place where you can set up an office at your house, fantastic. Set up a writing, writing things in there. I have like writing dice. I have like an hourglass. I have like all kinds of writing memorabilia and things on my desk. I even have like a writing candle that my nephew gave me. But these are things to kind of help get me into the writing mood. Now, if you are not fortunate enough to have an actual designated office in your house, but you do most of your writing in your house, then wherever you do your writing, kind of make it a writing space when you're getting ready to write. So for example, if you do your writing on your dining room table, then when you're getting ready to write, have a few things that you will always help get you into the mood for writing. It could be writing books. It could be, your favorite book. It could be some things, pens, pencils, pads, whatever, that help get you into the writing mood. And if you always go to a designated place to write, then go to that same place every time. Like if you always go to a coffee shop, choose a coffee shop you're going to use as your writing coffee shop. And then you can always go to a different coffee shop when you just want to go hang out with friends or whatever. It can really help get you into the writing mindset. All right, next tip. Establish realistic writing goals. And I know I have done this, I think more than once, because I think it's so important to have writing goals if you're really wanting to get that book done. And I will give you an example. It took me 10 years to write my first book. 10 years! That is a long time because, I was teaching in life and, whatever, and I didn't really commit. And I learned after that one that, that's a little too long if I want to make this into a series. So I had to come up with some writing goals, and I listened to a lot of different writers and give their personal writing tips on writing goals. And the vast majority of them, and I've already covered this in multiple episodes, writing every day doesn't work for me. So what worked for me as a teacher, I was teaching all day, plus I had, to work out and get dinner and do all of this stuff. It just wasn't realistic that I would be able to write every day. So I learned that for me, the best goal was to write 2,000 words a week. And I started my weeks on Monday so that I had the weekend to catch up if I didn't get my 2,000 words in. Most weeks I did go over the 2,000 words, but there were many weeks where I would have Monday 0, Tuesday, 0. Wednesday, 0. Because I had a lot going on at school or I had a lot going on in my personal life. And you know what? It just didn't work. And then when I got down to the weekend, I was like, okay, I got to get these 2,000 words done. And that's actually pretty easy to do if I split it up and do 1,000 words on Saturday and 1,000 words on Sunday, but I get it done. If I was fortunate enough to write a couple days that week, then maybe I only had to do, 900 words over the weekend and it was great. But set realistic writing goals. And if you aren't sure, there are many different kinds of goals and I have done podcast episodes exactly on this topic. So go back, search through the episodes and find this one and then it can give you some additional ideas of different kinds of writing goals. All right. My third tip, make out your character sheets. And if you are going to do an outline, do it ahead of time. And let me tell you something about outlines. I do not do outlines for most of my books. I'm usually a right by the seat of my pantser. But sometimes if I get stuck, like if I get writer's block or if I'm just like, I don't know where this book is going to go, then I have found it helpful to take a step, just stop writing and come up with a very crude outline of where I want the story to go and where I want it to. I know where I want it to end. Where are some basic places I want my characters to go between where I'm at and the end of the book. And that actually is a great way to get you through writer's block and get you focused on where you need to go for your book. Now, if you already have an outline, obviously you don't need to listen to this, but it can be helpful. Now, again, I don't write outlines for most of my books. I am a write by the seat of my pants, but I do like having character sheets. So I do a character sheet. And I realized, by the way, when I was putting my notes together for this podcast episode, that I've actually never done a podcast episode about character sheets. So I will be doing that in the near future, very possibly next week. We shall see. But character sheets, I would do them and keep them. And if you're going to write a series like I do, you want to have them, even though you kind of know your characters pretty well by the time you get to like book 2, book 3, book 4. However, I have learned that I add stuff to my characters. And so if I don't add it to the character sheet, I might forget. So I do, for example, and this is going to be a kind of spoiler alert. In my newest book, the one I'm editing now, book 9 of the series, I actually did mention when Matt's dad passed away. And I haven't mentioned that ever, that his dad passed away. I've mentioned his dad more than once, like, yeah, my dad and I used to go camping, blah, 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 in different, of the book series. But I never mentioned that his dad actually passed away. But it was relevant to this particular book I'm in now, just a snippet, a very short thing, but it was something that now my readers know. And so that needs to get added to my character sheet. So I remember, talking about it and that I know how long ago he passed away. All right. Next tip. Oh, and this is an important one. Do please save your work in at least 2 different places so that if something happens to your computer, you have it saved somewhere else. Now, if you are the type of person that has an external hard drive and you always save to your external hard drive, brilliant, because you can take that external hard drive anywhere you want to go. But nowadays, it really is very convenient where you don't necessarily need that external hard drive, although I do back up all of my books on an external hard drive when I'm done, but save them to some sort of cloud. And it can be the iCloud, it can be Microsoft Office, it can be somewhere where you don't have to be on your computer to access it, so that if something happens to your computer, it crashes, you get a virus, anything like that, you have that work saved. And of course, Scrivener is good for that too. If you use Scrivener as a writing aid, you can save it in Scrivener, and Scrivener actually backs it up all the time. But I would save that Scrivener file as well, not just on your laptop, but I'd have it saved in some kind of cloud as well. But trust me, you definitely want that to have a backup. And yes, this is from personal experience. So yes, always back up in 2 different places. All right. Last tip I have that's not writing related is this. Read, read, read. Read, read, read. Just because you're writing a book doesn't mean you take a step back from reading. Reading can really help get you into the mood to write. And if you're writing self-help books, oh my gosh, they will help, hey, I like the way this person did this. Maybe I'll copy the way they did that. Or I do not like the way this person did this, so I don't want to do my book like that. But read, read, read. Read in the genre you are writing. Read writing books. Just read. But read, read, read. Don't stop reading because you're writing. All right. Let's get to writing tips. But before I get to part 2 in the writing tips themselves, it's time for the crazy law / writing prompt. And if you are new to the podcast, every week I give you a crazy law. And that is a law that once upon a time was a real law. Maybe it's still in the books, who even knows? But your job, or should I say your challenge, should you choose to accept it, is to write a short story based on that law. And it's just kind of a fun way to flex your writing muscles and give you a break from your work in progress. All right, this week's crazy law. In Spartanburg, South Carolina, it is illegal to eat watermelon in the Magnolia Street Cemetery. Now, wow, that's bad for me because I eat watermelon like every day. And if you follow me on social media, you know that I'm actually starting to grow watermelon in my backyard and I'm so excited. But why they had to make that a law, I don't know, but I'm sure you will come up with a very fun idea of why they had to make that a law. But let's move on. Here are a few just very, very basic, remember we're sticking with basic, tips for the actual writing itself. Okay, first off, and I have mentioned this so many times, first drafts are messy. They're just messy. Don't worry about grammar. Don't worry about sentence structure. Don't worry about how you're starting the paragraphs or if your paragraphs look good or, what kind of writing tags or dialogue tags you have. You don't worry about any of that in your first draft. The goal of the first draft is just to get that story down on paper. Get it down. You want that story completed. Then you get to go back and revise and edit. And then you worry about grammar. And then you worry about sentence structure. And then you worry about dialogue tags. Right now, in the first draft, you just want to get that story written. So I know I've done a whole podcast episode on tips on how to get that story done in that first draft done. So go back and look at that if you want that. Right now, remember, these are just basic tips. All right. Number 2 on the whole writing thing is choose a point of view. And I think my personal opinion is that you want to do this early on. Like decide if it's going to be in first person or if you're going to do it in third person. Because sometimes, and I've seen authors do this, is they'll kind of go back and forth between first and like, I'll fix it later. And absolutely. And that's totally, if that's the way you write, do it that way. Personally, I have found that takes just too much of my time to go back and change it. I mean, it is really time consuming to go back and make sure that you've been going back and forth between first person and third person. Now you got to make it all one or the other. And it is time consuming. And it's stuff, maybe you could be spending that time doing other stuff instead of actually changing that. So choose a point of view. And I've actually done a whole podcast episode on point of view as well. So you can go back and decide, which point of view would be best for your book. The next tip is kind of on the same wavelength, and that is to choose if you're going to write in past tense or present tense. And I know just from being in writers groups that a lot of authors don't pay a lot of attention to this in the first draft, and that's totally fine. Okay, it's totally fine. You can be going back and forth between tenses and then decide. The reason I suggest kind of making a choice early on is because it really does take a while to change it. So let's just say, I know just from, let's say I've read 6 pages of someone's work and I tell them to pick one, them having to go back and change, to make it either all present or all past. You have to literally look at every single sentence in every single paragraph on every single page. And I know that just the 6 pages is like 5 minutes. It takes like 5 minutes to do that. And I know that doesn't sound like a lot. It's only 5 minutes. But if you've written your entire novel that way, your entire novel, having to do 5 minutes of work for every 6 pages just to figure out past or present tense and change them, that is a lot. That is a lot of time. It adds up. And now you're spending 3 or 4 hours just on changing the tenses when you could have done it so easily as you were writing your first draft. So that is just a suggestion. Choose if it's going to be past or present tense, and that's really going to help you out. And my last very basic tip, and I know I mentioned this on multiple podcast episodes, but as you are writing your first draft, write yourself notes as you go. And it can be literally on the side. If you're doing it in Word or in Scrivener, there's places where you can write comments on the side. Or if you're more anal and you're like me, I have Post-it notes. I use Post-it notes a lot. I even have a Post-it note next to me right now because when I was making the notes for this podcast, I thought about that whole character sheets thing, and I made a note that I want to do a podcast episode on character sheets because if I didn't write the note, I probably wouldn't remember. And next week when I'm getting ready to do it, I'm not going to remember that I wanted to do on character sheets because I forgot to write myself a note. I write myself notes as I go because I will think of something as I'm writing and it's not appropriate for this section of the book, but I want to maybe look into it later, or I want to research it later, or I want to add that scene later. And so making notes is helpful. And that really helps me as a writer. And I know many, many authors do this. So that's just a suggestion. I do it on sticky notes. You can do it on the side comments in Word or Scrivener. I know, very basic. All this stuff is very basic, but it is all really important stuff that can be helpful as you're writing your book. So that's it. Next week, very possibly character sheets, we'll see. But if not, no worries. I drop a new episode. And remember, if you haven't followed me yet, please give me a follow, subscribe. I'm on multiple places everywhere from Spotify and YouTube and Apple Podcasts and Audible and pretty much anywhere you want to go. Follow me there, give my podcast a like or a rating, and I drop a new episode every Wednesday. So until next week, stay safe, and I will see you all next week.